Hello everyone, this is Silence Did Good, back at it. Of course, balancing my time and my content between Silence Did Good, based on, of course, Benjamin Franklin, back in the Revolutionary Wars pseudonym, and Mr. 13 Things, based, of course, on the fact that I can't count, how to keep track of how many important things we learn at a time. But knowing the physical constraints of specific gravity, angular displacement, both of which are unitless, distance, area, volume, mass, force, work, power, pressure, torque, density, and unit weight being 13 things, and then one more being time. You get the shtick of what my kids are dealing with. So what we're looking at right now is Sketchup, and a quick refresher or a first look at those that want to start at least using this program as a way to kind of internalize the fact that the world became 3D and 4D in the last 5 to 10 years when we started having a lot more gaming and access to free resources like Sketchup. So this is Sketchup 8. It might look very similar to yours, and what we want to do on any program usually is get things set up so it relatively looks the same. And we do that here by going to View, Toolbars, and turning on the large tool set, and then turning off a lot of the other ones right now. Sandbox, and unfortunately View, Toolbars, turning off a lot of the others. View, Toolbars. And sometimes in other programs you can right click on there, but you can't in this one, so you go to View Toolbars. You're turning off a lot of the things. View Toolbars. So your brain starts to see the same thing. View Toolbars. I've turned off basically all the sketchy physics. View Toolbars. And then maybe you might turn off Views. View Toolbars. And I've turned off basically most of the, I'm not going to call it crapola, but a lot of the things you have a relatively the same look of things here. When you start any drawing, probably it's a good idea to check what your settings are. So in this case, we're dealing with a file. Immediately you want a file save as, but before you do that, you might want to go to Window, Model Info, and check that you're know what system you're in and what you're measuring based on angles and some other of the other settings. But basically we're going to stay here in decimal meters. That looks good. And hit here, and immediately doing a file save as and saving it someplace that you know where it is. I'm just going to do that, not saying knowing where I am, but I've got untitled. That's no good. File save as. You don't see it. I'm kind of going through here. I can put it in why not Lucy's school folder, and what you're missing down here in the bottom is me putting in a file name called basic.skp. So making sure that, especially if you're working in a group, that you've got the kind of the same look of things, making sure that when you start a data structure, anything you have know what the settings are in there as much as you can, and you've got lots of other settings usually, and hopefully you're starting from the same base drawing, and then realizing that you can start turning different things on, usually by checkboxes and the like. SketchUp is one program that did not slide into the ribbon world, which a lot of other programs did. More on that as you look into Word and things like that. But it is a free program now owned by Trimble. Started with by a company called Last Software in the year, I believe it was 1999 or something like that. So relatively new software, and what you can then start to do is try to just figure your way around. And you notice there we're coming to our first math concept, or if you want to call it math concept, the concept that in the graphics world we have picked red as to be our X, or our standard position angle, green being Y, and blue being Z. And now the point of this little short video here is the fact that very quickly on a lot of programs you want to learn that there's a lot of shortcuts usually on the keyboard until you're icon based. It's very often a good idea to have a list of shortcuts, and a lot of them tend to be the same. So I'm going to type L here, and you see that all of a sudden I'm getting the line that starts there. I hit a space bar and that clears everything. So space bar or clicking there kind of clears the cursor. Or if I say A, it's giving me the arc basically. So that would be like this one over here. Very often you can select things by sliding through and then right clicking over the top of one and erase. So getting everything set up the same way in each drawing and then beginning with the same basic template, if you would, has to do with setting your environment the same. And you'll see that's what a lot of programs that are dealing with data like Khan Academy or anything else that is building a back-end data store are going to do, make sure that everything is set in the right way by the way lists are set up and the like. And so ostensibly great program to play around with, but what we're going to look at here is the proof or the epiphany that I had at one point of the world being 3D. So the idea was here, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line, and I wanted to kind of put the line, you hear and see in the bottom right something called the VCB, the something control box, and I wanted to have it go over, and I could signal this in Sketchup with a hard bracket. I wanted it to go 10 in the X and 10 in the Y, and I did that, and it wouldn't take it. And then I wanted to use a relative coordinate 10, 10. In other words, I want to go 10 in the X and 10 in the Y, and it wouldn't take it. So what did that prove to me? It proved to me now going back that if I had said 10 in the X and 10 in the Y and 0 in the Z, close my hard bracket, it took it. Hard to see that. And then I wanted to use a relative coordinate, so you see the idea of delimiters. So I used the less than, and then I wanted to go maybe 5 in the X and 5 in the Y and 0 in the Z, close the delimiter, and it took it. And then I wanted to go basically relative 10 in the X and minus 10 in the Y and 0, and it took it. And in the end, I generally want to right click, space bar to finish, left click, right click over the top and erase. That was personally personally for me, it was the first time I had an experience when I realized that default in much of what our kids are dealing with is in 3 dimensions. There are ways to change the settings in SketchUp or in other programs to deal with a 2D space or even a 1D space if you're dealing with a number line. However, the default was 3D space. Now, just to finish this out, fun idea here is I'm going to now realize that another default that's interesting in SketchUp is once it has a closed loop, it adds that face in between. So you have the idea of nodes, edges being lines, and faces. And SketchUp immediately closes up the face as a default setting. That can be changed, of course. And so then you get the concept of being able to move things and think of in 3D space. So I'm grabbing here with a left click. I now am saying M for move. I'm going to left click and I'm wanting to drag around here. Once again, I can tell it open bracket, hard bracket. I want to go 0 in the X, 0 in the Y, and then maybe 20 in the Z. Close my hard bracket, and it just did it. I'm then typically either space barring or left clicking over there, and you see that things are moved around. So if I wanted to now, instead of just moving, wanted to copy, I could grab this. So I grab select first, and then going to go control in this case and hold that. So now that's going to do a copy. So now you see the copy, and I can now do relative, which is a less than symbol, 0, 0, minus 3 or minus 4, close that bracket, and you see that it did the copy. The whole point in this, besides showing you some SketchUp stuff, is to show you the fact that implied very often is if you have a set of 3 numbers in a horizontal list or a vertical list is 3D space. And though our mathematics doesn't cover it, our kids tend to be doing that a lot younger than we would think, as we watch them immersed in technology. And part of the great conundrum is drawing this ability for our kids to learn to connect some of the high math skills they are using when they're playing their games. At the same time, paying homage, of course, to those all-important tests, which don't test you on SketchUp because it's not considered math. Thanks for listening. This is Mr. 13 Things. Get in and play on SketchUp as often as you can. It's one of those great project, if you call it, project playgrounds for kids who may have already finished out the content that they were supposed to do in the day. Thanks for listening.